Okay, so let's continue adding some geometry. I think we need some more here in the head. It's looking pretty blocky, so I'm gonna go ahead and add a couple edge loops. And maybe one there, one down here. Maybe we'll do a third one. So around there. Okay, and now what I'm gonna do is just manually kind of model this into more of a spherical shape. So I'm gonna turn off that view for X-ray so that we can get a more clear picture. And so I'm having trouble getting the right zoom level. It either zooms in too quickly or not in the right spot. So to fix that, I've mapped the view frame selected to my shortcuts. So if I wanted to do that, I could right click here and add it to my shortcuts, or my quick favorites as they're called. But once you do that, if you press Q, you can have access to that in this menu that pops up. So now that I've framed it, the zooming is much more reasonable in terms of how fast or slowly you zoom in and out on a point like this. So now that that's set up, I'm just going to go ahead and we'll jump into side view here, move that down. And I'm going to use this red handle that does both axes, both the Z and Y axis, but not the X. We don't want to move this one left and right because it's supposed to be right on that Y axis here. All right, let's go ahead and maybe bring these vertices up. Okay, I forgot that I'm using the mirror modifier tool here, so I don't need to select that one. And now what we're trying to do is create some nice edge flow. So everything you do from here on out is about getting edge flow to look correct and to kind of seem natural. All right, so just kind of sculpting the neck there. And let's bring this one up. And bring the cheek back a little bit. So there is there are a lot of tutorials online for creating geometries for faces and heads, and this is not really supposed to be an assignment for that, but it is good practice. So we will just do the best we can without spending too much time. This, again, is not the focus. All right. Try not to make your polygons too crazy in terms of shape. They should be fairly in the shape of a square to some extent. They shouldn't be too deformed. So you wouldn't want one that's like this, right? This is a really deformed shape. Okay. The head does look a bit tall, so maybe we will bring down the top. Okay. And the one thing I might do here is add a nose. So to do that, we are going to need some more edge loops, and that's okay because we actually needed a couple more anyway. So I only need to add one here because, of course we're mirroring, and so I'm just going to hit escape and it's going to put that right in the middle, and then we'll go down and actually model all of these vertices so they help reinforce the shape of our mesh character here. So these are very perfectly straight across. One of the things you could do is go into edge mode and do Shift, Option, Select, or Alt Select, and you could actually go into the side view, and we can use the scale tool here in the y-axis and just bring it out a little bit. And what that will do is it will move it off of being in perfect alignment between these two vertices. So it helps create that curve already for us. All right, so I want to go here into vertex mode. Let's go and grab that tool there, and just use our x-axis to move that a bit closer. Okay, and what we're trying to do is create a patch or a polygon that we can extrude from, because we will need to extrude. I'm going to go to face mode, select that piece there. I'm going to extrude out. You have to be careful. What's happening right now is it's creating an extra face inside, and so it can't merge these two together. And it's also extruding this off of the axis. So I'm going to undo. I'm going to try that one more time. But this time, when I hit the E key, I'm going to hit escape. And then escape will essentially undo the movement of the extrude. The extrude is still there. But I'm going to use the Y handle to actually move that perfectly straight out. And then because we're in X-ray mode, I can select through the geometry and actually just delete that face that was created. So X, choose faces, and now we've got an open hull, like a mesh that doesn't have that non-manifold geometry inside. Okay, let's go to side view, go to 1 on the keyboard so that we can manipulate these vertices, and let's just move those roughly into a nose shape. Okay, and in the front view here, maybe I'll bring these a little bit in here, in and down. Okay, again, we're not really spending much time creating the world's best model here for the face, but I think it's going to be worth our while to just try to sculpt it into a more interesting shape than it was. Okay, and let's bring these top ones down, try to round the head off even more. And if you want to move in all of the axes at the same time, you can just click in the middle of the move tool, and wherever your viewport is looking is how it constrains that movement. So if you imagine a vertical and a horizontal line going right through the direction of the viewport, and that is how it's going to move this vertice. So you always have to look at it in multiple views. Side view. And maybe a bit more out in the back. Okay, so this polygon here is getting pretty stretched. So that isn't a great situation to be in. I think what we'd want to do is really pull this up like this to try to make that a little bit nicer. Let me just move this one down. And you can see it's really deformed. It's actually folding that polygon in half. Okay, so I think we want to maybe move that in like so. Okay, actually, that's getting much nicer. There is a bit of a sharp peak here in the back, so I'm going to go ahead and try to soften that out. And the top of the head is a little bit flat, so we can grab these two and pull them down slightly. Okay. That's pretty good. It looks like a person's face. I don't know. Not maybe the best, but if we want to, we can go ahead and add another edge loop here. I'm going to hit escape. And I can actually just, try to pull these in and create a little bit more of a separation between. Actually, I'm going to undo that, and we're going to move this edge loop up slightly. And I'm going to bring this one in. And so that helps us create a profile that isn't so straight up and down here with the neck. Okay, that is a little bit better. And then we've got some weirdness here with the combination of shoulder transition to the trapezius muscle here. So, this might actually need to be pulled up. It really depends on the type of character you're creating as well. I think this is the type of edge flow that would be in place with a character that has its arms raised like this. So just try to create this curve between the shoulder and into the neck. Okay, so that looks a little bit more natural, maybe not perfect because this is, after all, a low polygon model, so we're not going to be able to get it absolutely perfect, but there's more improvements that we can continue to make here. So I'm going to add an edge loop right below these edges here, and then I'm going to actually pull these out to create a little bit of a shelf. Right, and that's going to be maybe where the pectoral muscles would be. And I'm going to maybe bring this shoulder blade out, and we will continue from there. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and just clean up some other areas that need some help. I think maybe along the side there should be an additional edge loop, just kind of to go around the side around the arm, and then up maybe into the neck and then the head. So I'm going to go ahead and just add that now, and I'm going to hit escape so it's exactly in the middle. And then if I want to, I can just kind of come into this front view, and we could scale it, but first I'm going to actually deselect that vertice there at the that end, and then here. And that's because I don't want this vertice to be scaled away from this Y axis here. Otherwise we'll sort of create a hole in our geometry. So I'm going to deselect those, and then when I go to scale it, we're going to choose X. And so I actually want to just slightly scale it on the profile there. And all that does is makes a slightly less work for me to go and clean up those placements of the vertices. So let's just jump into the move tool and just see what we can do here. Okay, that's probably fine. Now I can actually go and kind of model the neck to be a bit closer. Okay, that needs to be kind of resolved here, this shoulder blade. Okay, and now what I can do is start bringing these vertices around the edges and sides of our character in a little bit to create a more round shape. And the topology can be a little bit tricky to try to figure out. Oftentimes a reference is really handy. Again, this isn't really an assignment focused on the modeling aspect of this, so you could just try to pay attention to how I'm structuring this mesh. Of course, you can get some references, some anatomy references and things like that to do a much more realistic job. But the goal here for me is just to make it seem a little bit rounded off compared to what it was at the beginning. So we get some nicer deformation when we go to apply an armature into the character's mesh. Okay, and we can, I think, bring these up. Let's use the scale tool to make this go a little bit faster. It's going to just scale in the X dimension here. And ankles actually tend to be fairly small, so we can really scale that in. And maybe I'll just add an edge loop here. Grab those top. Okay, so that looks a little bit more like a foot. All right, I'm just trying to rough in the shape here. that a foot without a shoe on it might look like. Again, if you haven't done much modeling, it's nearly impossible to do this without a reference. I've done this a few times, so I'm able to do it without. So if you get really into this and want to do a super accurate job, definitely feel free to go ahead and get a reference to help you out. Okay, so that looks halfway decent, and then maybe we're going to just adjust the legs around the knees here. All right, let's add one edge loop here in the middle of the torso. And let's go ahead and move that in. Okay, so that's coming together. The leg is looking a little bit better than it was. We have this inside geometry here to sort of deal with. Okay, so this is a person with a fairly short, shorter leg and a longer torso. So you know what you could do is lengthen that a bit to exaggerate it, and we can sort of kick these legs out and maybe just bring the hip out a little bit as well. Again, you can't really do this without a reference, or at least not easily, so you'll spend a lot of time really designing the character in 3D space. I just want to get this geometry set up so when I deform it, it looks halfway decent. And so I'm going to stop readjusting the proportions, I think, now, and just focus on getting this arm to look a little bit nicer. So let's go ahead and think about adding an edge loop this direction. Okay, so if we look at the hand here, looks like let's just jump into top view. Looks like we can kind of clean that up a little bit as well. And yeah, let's go ahead and add an edge loop around this profile. I'm going to hit escape, and what we will do is scale this along the Y. And that's not going to pull the vertices off of the origin, so you don't have to worry about deselecting those. And let's maybe try to scale this in. It's a bit thick for my character here, so let's bring this down. And I think I actually want to add some geometry around this part of the shoulder just to be able to hold this shape a little bit better than it's doing right now. And so that way I can sort of pull these out and pull this one in. So I'm just scaling in the Y here. And I think this vertex, I may actually push that forward. Maybe not quite enough vertices available here to really start doing that. So I'm going to leave that for now. I will push this one up to create a curve. Okay, so this is a tricky spot. You really have to look at how anatomy works when the pectoral actually connects to the shoulder. In reality, it doesn't connect like this. It would, the edge flow would actually curve all the way up to the top of this arm. We don't really have the luxury of sculpting it in quite that detail here. So I'm going to just kind of skip over that and rough out the shoulder. And I'm just kind of creating a depression here where the shoulder would meet, transition across the trapezius muscle into the neck. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get this wrist dialed in. So I'm going to scale that in the X, or sorry, not the X, the Z. And we're just going to move this one up. And let's go ahead and add an edge loop here at the wrist. And I actually want this to be somewhat lined up and straight. So I'm going to do scale, and we're going to scale it along the X, and that's going to crush it together. So we're not going to cross over the origin. We're going to start with our mouse pointer over here, press SX, and then move towards it, but don't cross it. And that will straighten these out for us. And now when I scale on the Y, it will create a thinner wrist. And I can sort of move that to look more like a wrist there. Maybe move that a bit back. Okay, and if I want to, I could sort of extrude a thumb or something out of this. I'm not really going to do that. This is just going to be, you know, sort of a rough placeholder for a more complicated hand model if I ever decide to do a better job on this in the future. So let's go ahead and start scaling this and moving some of these vertices in place here. So I'm going to sort of think about what the shape should look like. Now in reality, the muscle would actually be curved here across the forearm. So if you want to do a super realistic topology there, you'd have to account for the fact that this is in a T-pose in a rotated state. We're not going to worry about that for the purposes of this assignment. Okay, and we're going to move this back in space to create a little bit of a curve. It's just going to help with a more realistic result. Again, this is going to be fairly abstract in terms of its relationship to real anatomy. Okay, I think this is actually good enough to where I might want to think about stopping. Um, One of the things to realize is that when we put our rig in, it's actually going to move these vertices. So I'm just going to do a quick test with. It would do a much smoother job, but what I'm noticing is that in general, this arm is maybe not quite long enough because it should come down to about mid thigh. So I'm going to just pull the arms out. And then the hand. Okay, that's looking a little bit better. Again, you'd have a real character reference. I'm just sort of eyeballing this. And let's just take a look at the shaded view. That's okay. That looks pretty good for what we're trying to do here. Okay, so not a terrible edge flow, not perfect, but now what we can do is go back to object mode, and let's go back here to our modifiers. We can actually click apply to our modifier, and now our mirrored object is one solid mesh. And the other thing we can do is go into subdivision surface, and we could just leave a dynamic subdiv surface on here, and it will sort of smooth everything out, turn it into a bit of a blob. So if you really liked this kind of, so we can actually turn off smooth shading. We can do shade flat if you really want to see these faceted features of the model. Or, you know, you can enable subdivs, turn on smooth shading, and get a, I have to select the object, try that again. There we go. And then when we deform this, it'll be nice and smooth. So that is it for preparing our object for deformation. And if we notice that we're not getting good deformation, we can come back and modify the geometry further.